Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's Admiration. Isa and I are back from holiday, as you can see. It's never easy to come back from holiday, but I think we've managed to brighten our week up with one of the funniest ads that I've seen for a good while this week, Isa? So
Yeah.
it's given us a lot of smiles on our return. Shall we jump straight into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this week we have looked at an Andrex ad. Not many ads with such a funny title. First Office Poo. Shall we dive in and watch it?
Yeah.
5,009.
Excellent. So, well, gave me a couple of smiles. I guess it might be worth just sharing a bit of context on this Andrex ad. So it's quite a change from what they've been doing before. And Isa, you and I were just talking before we started recording. And it's grounded in this insight that they got as a brand, which is that 50% of the UK population are shy or uncomfortable about needing a number two. Particularly, they don't even want to have to think about having a number two away from their own house. So whether that's in an office, whether it's at a friend's house or whatever. So the insight behind the campaign is obviously quite a strong one. And I think if we dive in and look at the ads, look at the results, it will be quite interesting to see if that kind of sense of discomfort comes through, or indeed if the humorous way that they've told it means that people can start to get comfortable, which is exactly the idea that the brand has. Should we dive in?
So we can see there, in general, I think the strongest point for the ad is how distinctive it felt and how that's contributing to the sales impact score, but also how highly effective it is in generating that consideration for people the next time they're buying toilet roll, including Andrex in their consideration pool, really making them think about the brand.
Yeah, and I guess it's quite interesting. I mean, you've called out the two green ones that are jumping out at us, but yeah, that distinctiveness score is really exceptionally high. And we did say it was such a big change for them, and for the category there, which obviously is standing out. Now, is this different when we look at different demographic groups? Young or old, or male or female? How does that look?
Yeah, I think unsurprisingly, men find toilet humor, I think, a lot more hitting close to home than women do. So when we flick to the male audience and we actually look at the percentiles when it comes to their profile, so amongst men where the ad sits in terms of the other ads in the UK, it's actually in the top 10% ads for men when it comes to really eliciting that potential to drive immediate sales, but also from a branding perspective, it is quite high as well in that top 25% on brand impact. And certainly a measure that sticks out there is the claimed attention, how it grabbed men's attention straight away. But also the fact that the brand meets their needs. So yeah, quite an interesting change there when we look at men versus women.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it's not surprising, but you can never be completely sure. And I think what's worth us just reminding people of here, exactly as you said, this isn't looking at men versus everyone. This is looking at how men responded to this ad versus how men respond on average to other ads, so that we're really, normalizing it in that way, which is interesting. Now, we also had a look at age, and this was quite interesting for me because and it just reminds us that we're not always the audience. I had this nasty suspicion that maybe older people would be more disgusted or even less comfortable, talking about toilet humor. And when I was on holiday last week and this ad came up, I have to admit, I did show it to my mum and her partner, just to see how they reacted. They're obviously like quite a bit older, and just to see how they responded, and they were smiling. But yeah, when we look at this more generally, is it young people or old people or everyone who actually reacts well to the ad?
Yeah, it is surprisingly the older people who find it find it more distinctive, find it more humorous. They actually take a bit more from it than younger people, which is quite interesting. I guess it goes against what people might have expected. And actually, even looking at the campaign background and what Andrex was trying to deliver with it, I think there was an element of them saying actually it's usually younger people who are wanting to talk more openly about things. So it is interesting how it actually has managed to hit older people as well, and more impactfully so.
Excellent. Yeah, that is interesting. So male, and particularly kind of, I say older, not particularly older, but over 40, I guess, was when we were looking at it, that it's done well among. Excellent.
Yeah.
And we've talked a bit about the distinctiveness. Should we dive into that a little bit more in terms of what it is that makes it distinctive, or how people talk about that?
Yeah, I think, it comes up a lot on what people liked about the campaign. I think there is an element of unexpectedness when it comes from the Andrex brand. People were maybe not expecting the brand to do something so bold, so humorous, because they're used to a very different approach from Andrex. But some of the generic positive comments as well described how like the whole advert is hilarious, is cleverly done, very different. I like the whole thing from start to finish. It's kind of awkward and uncomfortable, but it's also silly, which makes it great. The concept and the idea is quite different and interesting. But generally, I think the humor is one of the things that makes it quite distinctive versus everything else that's been done in the category, but also that's been done from a brand perspective. This comment's quite nice. The advert had a sense of humor. The situation is relatable to those who work in an office environment. The presentation of the product and the tone of the advert gives the brand a more down-to-earth and relatable image, which perhaps maybe before it didn't have, or it had in a very different way with the portrayal of the puppies, and talking about the product aspects more in terms of like the softness and the durability of Andrex versus other brands.
Because there's a lot of talk here about it being distinctive and humorous, but also, one of the things that jumps out, like relatable as well. I mean, so they've obviously, at least for many people, got the kind of tone just about right, because you definitely could have gone too far in one direction, and particularly given that people are so uncomfortable around this, that makes quite a lot of sense. Shall we jump in a little bit more? You've talked about the humor. If we go and look at the emotions, is it the humor that dominates? I mean, I'm going to assume it is.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to humor, it's performing well above the country norm in terms of that overall emotion, what people feel for the ads. We can see there 27% on laughter versus a norm of 6%, which is a massive difference. Naturally, then it scores a bit lower on like emotion.
Which I guess if we'd looked at their ads historically, love would have been much more dominant, whereas this really is a change of direction that's gone to the humor. It's also interesting just looking at that confusion, because we see loads and loads of positives, obviously, in terms of this ad, but I guess for some people it is a little bit confusing. There's in the middle, everyone's staring at her, and the story going on for quite a long time. So whilst we'd say it's successful and it's delivering humor, there's definitely a group of people who find it a bit trickier to follow what's going on there.
Yeah, I think as much as the message is explicit, it's also not. It could, I think some people really relate to it perhaps because they've been in that situation or they've almost like seen that situation happen. But for a lot of people, because I mean, there are essentially no words in the ad, it's all very
Yeah.
action based, the music sets the tone. It might be harder to follow for some people who prefer different types of cues when it comes to advertising, and they'd rather have like a narrator. I guess there's different ways in which people take in information, and I think that definitely plays a role here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But overall, I guess it's really nice to see that. I mean, for something that's uncomfortable, we always talk quite a lot about the role of humor. If you
Yeah.
want to make people get comfortable, then humor is one of the ways to do it because it just gives you access to something that probably people would be much more uncomfortable with without that humor. So, a clever use of humor in this case.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we've talked a little bit as well about we talked about it being quite distinctive and we talked about it differentiating a lot, I guess, both versus what Andrex has done before and what we'd expect from the category. And you talked a little bit about that kind of love would have been higher before and maybe much less of the laughter side. Have we had a look at a kind of category norm? Is that what we'd see? Sorry, I've got an alarm going off.
Yeah, I think when it comes to what the category usually delivers, so obviously we're comparing it to a country norm at the moment, and we're basing the ad's performance versus every single ad we've tested in the UK. But actually, when we focus on personal care ads, where we saw the norm for love and laughter for the total UK being around that kind of like 16% mark. Sorry, that like yeah, that 16% mark for the country on love and 6% for laughter. When it comes to personal care, the laughter norm is significantly lower, only at 1%. So it's really an emotion that the category is quite foreign to. You do think, I think when you think about personal care, you do think a lot more of that like emotion, that love emotion being portrayed. We can even think about some brands that do that quite well. I think the first one that comes to mind is maybe like Dove,
Yeah.
or other brands that focus very much on like yeah, almost like warm feelings. Whilst in this case, Andrex focused very much on driving that humor to communicate a serious message in a light-hearted way that actually did very well for them in terms of getting that message across.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes it distinctive. But also, I think, as I was just saying, it's like if you're going to try and deliver a more serious message that people are a bit uncomfortable with, then kind of humor's a clever way of getting in there and making people a bit more accepting of it,
Yeah.
which is good to see. Should we look at the key moments? I think we can probably all imagine what the key moments might be in the ad around driving the humor. But if we dive a bit closer into it and see.
Yeah, we can look at the second by second emotions, and I think that's where it's very clear the role of the puppy versus the role of kind of like the overall narrative in delivering the different types of emotions. So let's focus on just a number of them. If we focus on the positive ones of love, like, and laughter, maybe we can get confusion in there as well, given it was a bit higher than average.
Mhm.
We actually see where the different spikes of laughter are in the ad when the woman farts unexpectedly naturally causes, I mean, people are just childish, aren't they? It's always gonna like elicit some level of laughter there. But this peak here of love, if we play the ad, can see exactly where it comes in, which is that moment where she looks under her desk and sees the Andrex puppy looking at her, giving her the nod of approval there. Obviously, like a number of other little peaks of laughter throughout when she picks up the toilet roll. There's a bit of a lull there in the middle, which we can touch on in a second. The point where she kind of stops a meeting is coming up as well. People just looking at her, the stroke of the toilet paper. There's a number of moments that are highly, highly humorous, particularly her
This one.
choice of her choice of reading material for when she goes into the bathroom. But yeah, I think in general quite effective. But it is important for us, I think, to address this middle element here and how that is quite different to the beginning and the end of the ad, and I think certainly has an impact to the overall effectiveness of it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I mean it's great storytelling. They've like started with a peak that can immediately draw people in. They've got the laughter. They've gone straight onto that love moment, which relates to the Andrex puppy. And the Andrex puppy doesn't just drive love. We won't go into it today, but we saw that like for half of people, that is the distinctive brand asset that helps people know that the brand's for Andrex. And actually, without that moment with the puppy, based on everything else that people experience, I think they would have struggled to get to the brand. They would have got to toilet roll, of course, but they might not have got to Andrex. So that's really great because it makes people feel loved, but it also does a branding job, which is great. And then we've got other like clever little humorous moments, largely when she's interacting with the product and the kind of carrying your toilet roll through the office or choosing your reading material, which you mentioned is for going to live. There's all of those moments of humor. But exactly as you just said, Isa, normally we focus on all the positives, and this is a brilliant ad. But there's definitely potential to have a bit of a cut down there because you can see in the middle, like there's very little emotion happening for like 10 to 15 seconds. And of course, it's all part of the story arc. But it would be possible to deliver the same story, in a more condensed way. And there's also a number of mentions in terms of in that middle bit, like that there's a few too many people, kind of the way that people are staring at her, like people are uncomfortable about the idea of going to the toilet, but we obviously want people to get more comfortable with that. And there's probably a little bit too much discomfort in those moments with people, staring at her. That could probably be condensed. I think maybe a bad expression, but her just owning the moment a little bit more, and less discomfort in that kind of bit in the middle where there's a lot less happening. Brilliant ad, and I'm fairly sure we'll see them be out there with a cut down 30-second version that will be even more effective in the coming weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Shall we just flick back to summarize, because we weren't just looking obviously at the video ad. It's really great to see that they've moved the whole a whole campaign approach here. So on the right hand side, that's the out of home creators that they've got to go with the campaign. I think it's particularly positive. The ones on the right obviously are using the puppy, which we've just seen is a small part of the ad and yet very important to tie into their past and to cue the brand immediately. And of course, the brand has to be cued more immediately in out of home stuff where people are going past at yet more pace. Pretty compelling headline from the other ad, which I imagine would grab attention pretty quickly. But yeah, what a contrast from what they did before. So we've got the Andrex puppy, but obviously it was much more focused on that love emotion that you talked about earlier, Isa.
Yeah, I think it was a very smart and timely decision for the brand because they recently announced their partnership with Bowel Cancer UK. They're building up to a bigger campaign to launch in April, like a bigger TV spot to really focus on their partnership, and the fact that April is Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. So it almost, you need to think back and think, is our usual approach of using the puppies, talking about softness, talking about kind of like reliability, right for us to then address our partnership with Bowel Cancer UK? Probably not. And the fact that they're almost talking about an element of like becoming more comfortable in having difficult conversations or uncomfortable conversations, or even being more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. The boldness and the differentiation of this campaign versus what they've done in the past feels very, very appropriate and very smart for what they're going for.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And the get comfortable almost having three meanings, because get comfortable thinking about kind of bowel cancer awareness, get comfortable in terms of, you know, not being uncomfortable in talking about when you need to go to the loo, and also comfortable because that is a lot more of their heritage in being soft as an actual product experience. Brilliant. Thank you, Isa. Great to be back this week. And yeah, thanks to Andrex for the humour that they've brought on our first week back from holiday.
Yeah, thank you.